Yo, hello my people, this is Ziomek, and today I'm not reacting to music. We want to mix it up. So, there's a thing. I reacted to a song, probably you don't even know it. Some people will who watch this video, but thing is, it's just a song called Kool-Aid Kids. I think, yeah, that's what it's called. And so I wondered, why is it called that? And I know what's Kool-Aid, so it was weird to me. And people on that video explained to me that there was a massacre where it was something put into in a water and people they died or they were poisoned, something. And then one of those same people gave me a link. So I never heard of this, the story of the Jonestown Massacre. So I decided, you know what, time to learn something. And yeah, that's it. If you want to suggest to me what to react to next, it can be any kind of video. Am I too low? How about that? Better. Yeah, so if you want to suggest me something, do it. I'll react. How long is it gonna take? I don't know, we'll see. Maybe soon, who knows. So yeah, let's go. Never heard of this, I'm interested. Oh wait, this... What? I didn't watch this video, I didn't see to this part. Neither.
Guyana, officially called the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, is one of the most scenic countries
You
in
can
South
hear it,
America.
right?
It has one of the most varied landscapes of any country in the world, having marshes, sandy stretches, a desert, and luscious rainforests, some of which have still never been seen by human eyes because they're
It's in
so
South
hard to
America,
access.
right?
But in 1978, this peaceful tropical country gained notoriety for all the wrong reasons.
Wait, town,
Because of
not
one
country.
man named Jim Jones and his twisted vision. Jones first rose to prominence in the 1950s when he himself was only in his 20s. He was a dangerously charismatic man with some specific and niche views on the world. The 50s were a time when the Cold War was at its most dangerous, especially where America's own citizens were concerned. It was a time when McCarthyism summed up America's domestic policies and fear of the spread of communism, the Red Menace, was the major priority. But despite the fear of
Korean War
deportation
started
or internment
around
at
that
such
time.
renowned establishments as Guantanamo Bay, people like Jim Jones still openly preached in favour of an extreme left-wing world order. He believed, like many others did and still do, that communism was the way forward and the only way to achieve an ideal society.
It wasn't.
He was also a devout Christian, believing that communism was in compliance with the will of God and the Bible. And it was with this unusual combination of ideas in mind that he founded the People's Temple of the Disciples of Christ, often shortened to the People's Temple. In 1955, he founded it in Indianapolis, but everybody knows that if you've got a big idea, the place to go is California. So in the mid-60s, he packed up and moved his operations to San Francisco, though they also had footholds in LA,
Wait, so he did all
Sacramento,
that in
and
his
a few
20s
other
and
major cities
30s?
in the state. It was then that his activities began to gain some notoriety. This happened when he became one of those people who never shuts up about the end of the world. He predicted that an apocalypse was coming, and that this apocalypse would create a socialist paradise.
Yeah, it's always
on
coming,
Earth.
every
There
year.
was a large emphasis put on communal living during this period, as Jones and his cult enticed more and more people from within the state and nearby to join him in his vision. This stretched so far as to include children being raised communally, with an emphasis on the kind of physical discipline that's been illegal in schools for decades now. They would even hold
So they
disciplinary
beat kids.
boxing matches to teach wrongdoing children their lesson, which sometimes adults were involved in. Surprisingly, the People's Temple gained a lot of traction and had thousands upon thousands of devout members, all listening to the words of Reverend Jones. This may be due in part to the fact its members were not allowed to leave. They were forced to sign documents confessing to numerous crimes, including the molestation of their own children,
What?
which Jones blackmailed them with, saying that if they ever tried to leave, he
Oh.
would take the documents straight to the police.
Well,
There were
that's still
some
awful.
defectors, though, most notably a group called the Gang of Eight, who all fled together to try and get to Canada in 1973. Probably because the People's Temple was not the US government, they succeeded, writing letters describing their...
Wait. I won't stop often, maybe 1 or 2 times. So it's a cult. I get how cults work. Except, how did he get the money for this cult? Like, you can't do something like this with no money. Yes, you can find believers, but if they want to leave, well, we can just go. But you need to pay somebody. I don't know. I have many questions now.
Issues with the temple, but Jones was furious. He was reported to have waved a gun at people in one of his meetings, declaring that the Gang of Eight were Trotskyite defectors and Coca-Cola revolutionaries, and he even suggested that they should all kill themselves in order to maintain their apostolic socialism. In 1977, things reached a head for Jones and the temple in San Francisco. On the one hand, things were going very well for him, and he received a Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award for his work integrating the black and white communities of California, since a large majority of his followers were African American. On the other hand, the temple was now being investigated for tax evasion by the IRS, who suspected that it was not as religious as it claimed to be in order to gain the tax exemption. Even Jones's wife, Marcy, told the New York Times that he was actually an atheist, and had been an atheist all along, all to trick people into following his socialist ideas and following the example of his idol, Chairman Mao. Jones reached such a point of influence in the US that he once even had a private dinner with Rosalind Carter, the First Lady at the time. But after the husband, the name of Bob Houston, of a temple member who defected, was found murdered on some railroad tracks, the group came under more and more scrutiny. The press began to investigate and ran numerous exposés on Jones and what he was doing. So much so that in 1977 Jones fled to Guyana along with 1,000 other temple members. The temple had been renting land in Guyana since 1974.
But Guyana isn't a country.
Jones himself moved there,
Is that a country?
He had 50 or so residents. When he arrived, Jonestown was finally born, and his vision seemed to be realised. They had escaped what they judged was the creeping fascism of the United States government, and had set up camp in a completely different continent, taking their communal living to the next extreme. Before Jones arrived, the few members worked their fields and held lectures and classes for adults and children alike, often watching imported films from Guyana's capital, Georgetown, for entertainment. All of this changed when their glorious leader actually arrived.
Were people like brainwashed? There's murders happening, we don't let people leave, they blackmail people, and people still trust it? Huh? I mean, I understand that if you try to leave, then, they could be just stopped, but what if everybody understands that this place is screwed up and they want to leave? They can't? I mean, yes, they are not allowed, but if there's a lot of people from what I get here, I'm sorry for that sound. So, I don't know, but how did he make them all believe in him? I guess there are people like that. I mean, like Hitler. They just know how to talk people into doing anything.
Entertainment. All of this changed when their glorious leader actually arrived. From then on, they worked for 12 hours a day. All the films were Soviet propaganda films, and night lectures became long rants from Jones about his political ideas. It became a living nightmare. They couldn't produce enough food because it was overcrowded and poorly managed, and Jones's health was deteriorating. His original intention, apparently, was to provide food to the poor people in the region, but it was only set up for 100 residents. Hence all the subsequent problems. More and more people became disillusioned with the People's Temple and Jones, as his paranoia and madness became more evident, manifesting itself in a fear of the American government and newspapers. But the settlement's location in a dense area of the jungle, even the locals didn't want anything to do with, meant that no matter how much they wanted to flee, it was near impossible. Jonestown had armed guards, and if anybody tried to leave, there were mass search parties sent out. Jonestown had become an almost North Korea-like state of independence.
It's like prison.
Prison for everybody involved.
Jones
would interrogate his followers and would read out news articles from Radio Moscow and Radio Havana, giving a thoroughly biased perspective of what was going on
Havana,
in the
that's in
world to his
Cuba, right?
followers. Hearing only his voice
Communism.
and nobody else's convinced them that they were in grave danger, that the CIA and the FBI were after them and wanted to kill them, and that following Jones was the only salvation. The news bulletins became written and read by Jones alone and would be broadcast from speakers 24/7, denouncing America as a capitalist villain while praising the likes of Kim Il-sung and Robert Mugabe. The diet of the residents was so poor that more than half of them were suffering of fevers and diarrhea, and people were disciplined by being trapped in boxes or hung upside down in a well overnight. Or the
For
torture.
what?
Worse were the fates
For
of those
what?
who tried fevers and diarrhea, and people were disciplined by being trapped in boxes or hung upside down
Oh,
in
if
a
they-
well overnight.
If they did something that was not
Worse
allowed,
were the fates of
that's
those who
when
tried
it
to
happened.
escape, as rather than be killed, they were put in an extended care unit and were kept highly drugged at all times to the point that they were basically living vegetables. The most harrowing events were called White Nights rehearsals, where Jones would begin a drill that the CIA were attacking them. Twice during these drills, the people opted to
I feel
commit
bad for all those
revolutionary
people.
suicide,
Not for
rather
Jim
than
Jones.
flee to the USSR or fight their attackers. In
How
this
could you?
case, a simulation of mass suicide was carried out, and they were all given a liquid alleged to contain poison. Finally, rumours reached the Guyanese people, and eventually the US Embassy in Guyana. This attacked the attention of Congressman Leo Ryan, who had been a friend of Bob Houston's father, Bob Houston being the man I mentioned earlier who was found dead on the railway tracks. He became interested in Jonestown and personally visited in order to investigate. Ryan arrived with a news crew.
Wait. Maybe I missed or something, but why did Guyana allow them to do this? They didn't care? Because I mean, I understand them getting land in there. That's no problem, but didn't they need passports to get there? Okay, let's say somehow, well, okay, let's say they got them somehow, but the stuff that was happening, wouldn't it have wouldn't it have done something to Guyana's government earlier? Only now they care? Before that they were like, there's a thing called Jonestown, who cares? I don't know, this is
And went
weird.
to Jonestown, where a musical reception was held for them. Jones continued to rant and rave about government conspiracies, and people actually seemed happy. This, it turned out, was because Jones had frightened them all into pretending for the delegation so that nobody would discover what was really going on. After a day or two, the delegation left, going to catch a plane from the Port Kaituma airstrip. But by this point, multiple people had already tried to defect, and the US Embassy needed to arrange for a second plane to be sent. Because of this, there was a delay by roughly half an hour, and this delay meant that the temple's Red Brigade, their security, had time to drive there on a tractor and open fire on the entire delegation.
What?
There were 5 deaths, including a cameraman called Bob Brown and Leo Ryan himself.
They
who was
definitely
shot
went
more
crazy,
than
full on
20
crazy.
times. After this, Jones finally put his true plan into action. His plan of revolutionary suicide. It was carried out exactly like his White Knight's drills.
This whole thing is so
There are
stupid.
theories that the reason so many people actually went along with the suicide was because they believed it was a drill all the time. They were handed small glasses of Kool-Aid, laced with cyanide.
Oh.
Though there was evidence on the bodies that not everybody was willing, including many of the bodies having syringe marks where they had been injected
Now I
instead of
get
made
it.
to drink. And harrowingly, most of the victims of injection were the children. The children died first and the adults soon followed, and the entire thing was recorded by Jones, and this recording is available on YouTube. Though I
It
advise
is?
you that you should only listen to it at your own discretion, bearing in mind this is
It's a
literally
video?
the sound of 900 people dying, and we won't be showing it on Backfire. Even
I don't know
Jones
if I want to
committed
see
suicide,
that.
shooting himself through the head, though there is some speculation about whether or not his nurse may have shot him, and then shot herself. After the fact, and after the survivors of the Ryan delegation arrived back in Georgetown for medical assistance, news reached them that everyone in Jonestown was dead, with only
900?
a tiny handful of survivors.
900?
Eventually, the US Army and Air Force showed up and escorted the survivors back to help identify the bodies, all of which were tagged and returned to the US for proper burial. Until 9/11, The Jonestown Massacre was the single greatest civilian loss of life due to a non-natural event in American history, and the manipulation and madness of Jim Jones will live on forever in infamy and obscenity.
Wow. Now it makes me wonder, how did Jim Jones look? How did he look? But yeah, mass suicide like that, hundreds of people killing themselves. But yeah, the thing that shocks me the most, well, I don't know, overall this whole story shocks me in a way. Like, how easy it is to manipulate people. Like, it says that he probably didn't even care about religion. He just wanted to have like his own government and rule people. And he was against what his country, US, was. But yeah, I watched this video because I wanted to really see and get to understand what this whole drinking Kool-Aid thing means. And yeah, it's the worst part of the story, actually. But I don't know, he had even his own soldiers called, maybe not soldiers, guardians, something called the Red Brigade. I guess because of communism. But yeah, like I said, worst thing of this story is that they all thought that it was a drill, and they drank that Kool-Aid which was laced, and they all died. Yeah, just awful stuff. Okay, so if you want similar videos to this, suggest me. If you want something else, also suggest me. And I'll see you next time. This was very informative, very interesting. So it ended back in 70s, right? Late 70s. I'll read up more on this. This is very interesting stuff. Very interesting in a bad way, obviously. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And guys, I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.